you. Θα κάνουμε και τεστ.
Is the mic working? Yeah, okay. So we've sorted the mic. The clicker is working, okay. Right, okay, so I'm Alex. First of all, thank you, Nick, for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here and see some familiar faces that we used to be in the same building a couple of years ago, and we haven't seen each other for ages. Right, so a bit about myself. First of all, I know that I'm the only thing standing before lunch, so I will make it as soon as possible so we can go and eat. So I'm with Bournemouth University. I'm currently leading the cybersecurity and forensics pathway. In the past, I have a master's from ISG. I have worked in the industry, and I'm really interested and active in the web community, and in particular with the OWASP project, if you know it. Right, and now the academic kicks in, and if you go out from this lecture, this is at least one of the slides that I want you to remember. Okay, the web is a nasty place. Okay, because you have red team ninjas operating there, grabbing our data, and you might think that, okay, yeah, I don't care. I'm secure, I don't have anything to hide, or I don't go to bad websites. I don't do porn. I don't go to get cracked software. I'm not online gambling and stuff like that. So I am secure. As you probably know, or as you have heard from, at least from Miltos today, you are not secure, okay? Because the bad guys are actively hacking websites. This is called watering hole attacks, and they are adding malicious content that is grabbing your data or is grabbing your systems, okay? Today we're talking about tracking, and can this get worse? Yes, of course. We spend at least, the statistics say that we spend at least 1 day per week online, okay? So we are exposed to these threats at least for 1 day every week. And for the past 5 years or so, the device that we are using to access the web is not the PC anymore, it's the mobile device. Mobile device is not the mobile phone, it's the tablet, the smartphone, it's the smart devices that we all have, smart TV, or what have you, smart something. And maybe the second thing I want you to remember is that whenever you hear the word smart, in my mind, you should think vulnerable, okay? Right, so this started towards the end of my PhD. So I was thinking about, okay, well, my PhD was about smartphone security and privacy. So I was thinking, okay, we are spending so much time with this device, the smartphone, which to me doesn't sound so much secure in the other contexts that I have studied. Let's see what is happening with web, with threats like that. So I started actually testing browsers for desktops and smart devices, and this is a summary of my results. So 5 years ago, when these devices were the device for accessing the web, most of the controls that you love in desktop, like safe browsing to filter malicious and phishing sites, controls that are blocking, tracking cookies, private browsing, and the like, DNT, do not track me, and stuff like that, were not implemented in all the browsers that you had for Android, iOS, and what else we had? We had Windows Phone at the point. Now they are not there anymore. And we also had a lot of usability GUI issues with their configuration. a few years later, we focused on the safe browsing, on the filtering technologies that you have, safe browsing and smart screen. This is the first line of defense that you have against malware in your browser. And we found that the protection that you are actually getting in the smartphone is very, very low. In April 2016, we found that private browsing is not private at all, because you can you can get data from the browsing session even without forensic techniques. So we're not talking about recovery of data from the file system. And now we are getting towards the main topic of this presentation, which is tracking. And last year, we found some new tracking vectors, okay, which are actively used by trackers to get our web browsing history. Right, this is another slide that we used to teach together in Greece. This is 2007, I think, right? The session is recorded, so I cannot say some of the stuff that I would like to say, but there is this article from 2012, so 4 years from 2008, which says that, you know, guys, today I went to New York Times and I'm tracked by 100 trackers. This is what this journalist is saying here. So we are living in the post-Snowden era, okay? And this is actually one test I did when I presented a similar presentation for WASP London in November 2018. Okay, last November. Okay, so basically this is 5 minutes browsing. I wanted to, well, this was the Black Friday period. It was November, so I actually bought a TV, so I went to Paris. I also wanted to book a place to live, to stay in London, to present in the London chapter. This is me taking my favorite basketball team and the BBC. This is 5 minutes browsing in a clean vanilla version, vanilla browser that I just installed for the purpose of the test. And I have 152 trackers in 5 minutes. This is, by the way, a very nice add-on by Mozilla that you can actually visualize your own trackers. And this is more recent. So the New York Times have started discussing about privacy. If you Google, they have some articles about location privacy, about tracking. And I think in February, around February they started the privacy project, which has one aim, to educate us, to spread the awareness about privacy online. Okay. The funny part is that the privacy project has 100 trackers on it. Okay. So when I tested yesterday, I had 20, but my browser is automatically filtering some of them. The good thing is that today, most of the anti-tracking, okay, is the by default option. Okay, so 1 year ago, I think Opera started this, let's say, battle against trackers. They said, from now on, by default, all our users will have anti-tracking by default on. This has been followed by Firefox recently. And sadly, I recently heard that Chrome is breaking all the ad blockers. Okay, and unless you pay extra premium, you cannot have anti-blocking capability. Again, we are recording the session, but Google is earning money from this technology, so this is not a surprise for me. Anyway, tracking is not always evil. Okay, you might want to track your users in order to improve your website. You might want to do analytics and improve. But tracking, in my book, is malicious when it gives you a window to your personality, and it can also give you access to data that you don't want to share with others, or you don't understand that you are sharing with others. And these data are very useful for hackers, red teamers, okay, in phishing scenarios, and not only. Again, we don't have the time to. If I start talking about tracking and security and privacy, we can stay here for 3 hours. But this is 2 questions for you. Think about it and decide on your own. Do you prefer to have irrelevant advertisement when you're browsing, or are you scared when you get a personalized advertisement? Okay. Right, tracking technologies. So this slide summarizes the options that they had actually, the trackers historically, when we consider data being stored on the browser. Okay, it started with cookies. Okay, I think cookies are well understood, and it's well known that are being used actively for tracking. And well, cookies have a lot of limitations. Okay, it has very limited storage, but the most important problem is that people know about it and they clean them. So the trackers and the attackers have, the trackers have moved on to other technologies that give more benefits in storage, and they're less known, especially when they appear. So they started using plugins, extra software being installed in the browser, like Flash. So we had Flash cookies, Silverlight cookies, and stuff like that used for tracking. And then the next step in the evolution of storage APIs for browsers, in the browser ecosystem, is HTML5, okay, which gives you JavaScript capability to store stuff on the browser. A little bit of note, there are other technologies that can be used to track you, like fingerprinting in the browser, the headers, the HTTP headers that you are providing to HTTP requests. You have web beacons, but from now on, we are only talking about tracking that is using data that are being stored on the host. Right. If we think about HTML5, you have 3 options to store data. You have web storage, web SQL, and IndexedDB. Web SQL is deprecated, and it's recommended not to be used. Some of the browsers have kicked the technology out of their ecosystem, like Firefox. Others don't, like Chrome, Opera, still allow you to use web SQL to store data in your browser's clients, okay? The interesting thing about these technologies is that when we started this academic research about whether they are used for tracking or not, and this is an MSc project that we did last year. The funny thing was that we searched in the community, we searched technical reports, we searched academic papers, and we found that these technologies were believed not to be used for tracking. Which, if you think about it, if you consider the history of tracking, this is very weird. It's very weird that you have a technology that is new, fairly new, that people don't know about it, and it's not used for tracking. However, the specifications say otherwise. They say that these technologies should be treated as cookies. So you have to enable the users to know about their existence and allow them to delete the data that are being left on the client for obvious privacy reasons. Okay. So we said with the MSc student, My MSc student is Stefano Belloro. If you read regularly the BBC, he's the technical manager in the BBC in multiple languages. So depending on what you are reading in the BBC, he's contributing there, or his team, okay? So we said, okay, this doesn't seem right, let's test it. And this is what we did. We tested only two elements, let's say. The frequency of the use. We wanted to see whether these technologies were used, in particular for Web SQL, which was deprecated. And then the most important bit, as you can imagine, is are these technologies used for tracking or not? Okay, is what the community and academic research correct or up to date or not? So basically what we did, we collected, we got data from websites that we are using, the top 500,000 sites that we are using, and we did static analysis, and we identified trackers in this data that we have in the data set. To identify the trackers, we used DNS names that we knew that were frequently used by trackers, and we used the three most popular blacklists, like Disconnect Me and others that you might have seen if you are using AdBlock Plus or another anti-tracking technology. Well, this is the architecture. It's not very important, but let's jump quickly to the results. How much time do I have? Okay, right, I will. So basically, these technologies are used as a third-party sub-resource, which is not surprising. But what is the most interesting result here is that the newest technology is the most frequently used, but also that this deprecated technology is still used in 1% of the top sites that we are using. And what is even more interesting is that tracking is their main use. Even for the deprecated technology, half of the time, this technology is used to track us, okay? With regards to the most popular technology, 7 out of 10 times, this technology is used for tracking. The main use case of the technology is tracking. It's totally opposite of what we knew at that point that we did these tests. We found out that, as you might expect, that very frequently websites would have at least one tracker using these three technologies, okay? And with regards to web storage, this is almost 6 times out of 10. So we said, okay, we were wrong, okay? Now we know something new, okay? The trackers are using these technologies. Let's see what we can do against it. So the obvious thing to do, as in the cookie tracking mechanism, is to delete them, right? So we tested the popular browsers for Windows, macOS, and iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, okay? These were the browsers that we have tested, and we checked whether we could delete the data that the three technologies that we are talking about were storing. To do that, Stefano wrote an application. This is available online. There is an even more, let's say, user-friendly URL in the end of the presentation if you want to actually test your browser. Okay. And the results are not very encouraging. Okay. Firstly, we found instances where you cannot delete data at all from these technologies. And here we have to consider that when I say we cannot delete them, obviously I can delete my data, okay? My phone might be rooted, and I can write a script and delete the data. open the database and worst case scenario, sanitize it. Or I can do something about it. But if you think about users that are not technically and security savvy, we have a big problem here. Okay, the browser cannot help them protect against trackers. Okay, the second problematic finding was that in some cases, the browser might ask you to do an extra step in the GUI. In my opinion, extra step in the GUI is this step will not happen. Okay, and when I say the browser, if we think about who is using Android and Firefox, if you are in this case, no, it's only me then, you have this problem. Okay, you need an extra step in the GUI, which is not easy to find. And why is this important? Because the fact that you cannot delete this data means that the attackers can create zombie cookies, or they can use a technique which is called as cookie resurrection. Okay, and I will probably give an example for that in the next slide. So if you have one of these browsers in one of these devices, then let's get an example. So if you are using Android and you were using at that point Firefox 60, then if you try to delete IndexedDB and web storage, by the way, you cannot delete or store anything with WebSQL because I said this deprecated API is not available in Firefox. Okay, so for Firefox, you only have two options with regards to storing data. Okay, so basically, let's say that you have a tracker that is, you visit a website that has a third-party sub-resource, a tracker, and the tracker is installing data, okay, with IndexedDB and web storage. Okay, if you set the browser to, if you try to delete the data with Firefox in Android 8, you will delete the web storage content, but the IndexedDB will stay back. Why is this a problem? Because the tracker, the next time that the tracker finds you, will resurrect the web storage content with the IndexedDB that was left back. And if you think about it, we have a spectrum of technologies. It's not only about these HTML5 technologies. If there is one technology that is left behind by the browser, if you have cookie, flash cookie, web storage, and IndexedDB, and the browser deletes everything but IndexedDB, the next time the tracker finds you, then the IndexedDB will be used to resurrect all the data for these four technologies that I mentioned, and the tracker will use the functionality for each technology that corresponds to its functionality or whatever goal the tracker has. And when you delete them, this will be left back and will be resurrected, and it goes on and it goes on. Right. Let's see what happens with private session. So the private session is promising us to not store data while you're browsing. Okay. What we found was that private browsing is not private, okay? Because you can still have data persisting a private session after the session is destroyed, or even worse, you might have private data being leaked to normal sessions, to sessions outside the private session. And this is the summary of the cases where this happens. So again, with Android, if you have Opera 46.3, IndexedDB and WebSQL will remain a private session, but only web storage will be deleted. Again, the same problem, cookie resurrection, and obviously privacy violations. Right. Now, we have been working with the OWASP community and the browsers. Hopefully, most of these problems have been fixed. What is interesting is that, okay, most of the bugs have been found and have been patched, but the problem is that most users might not have access to the updates. Okay, most recently, most users do not have access to updates because of what is happening in the other side of the pond, okay? If you have a Hawaii phone, you know what I'm talking about. Other users are not bothered to install updates. And what is very interesting, and what we can confirm with this study, is that the bugs that we have submitted and reported multiple times appear and reappear in subsequent versions. So here, I'm talking about Opera 46. I think the current Opera is 49 or something like that. In subsequent versions of Opera, some vulnerabilities were fixed, and then in the next version, some vulnerabilities were appearing again, and it seems to us that we are kind of in the mercy of developers, and it seems that maybe the patching strategy is not consistent. Right. If you want to test your browser, hopefully all these vulnerabilities have been patched. The only thing that still remains is the Firefox bug, as far as I remember. Please, if you find that your browser is still vulnerable, please contact me or contact the vendor if you want. I mean, you can contact directly the browser. This work has been submitted and it's available in this journal. It's open access. We have been working with Firefox for the past year on privacy, especially on their tracking mechanism that has been recently introduced. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or you can email me later. Thank you. Yes. If you scrap your, when you say scrap your disk, what do you mean exactly? If you format the, yes and no. Basically, when you are unless we are talking about secure deletion of data on the hard disk, all the data can be recovered. Most of the data can be recovered with forensic techniques. Okay, I don't think that the tracker cannot do something like that on your, as far as I know, okay? Because you need low-level, well, it's costly. This is the reason, not the low-level access. But I mean, formatting your disk to avoid this stuff, I don't think that this is the way I would go forward. If you ask me what I'm doing, I'm using multiple browsers. And if I really need stuff not to be written on the disk, you can set up a RAM disk, a file system that resides only on your RAM. And when you destroy the disk, shut down the machine, wait for 15 minutes, then the data are gone with confidence. Okay. Okay?
So, this is the end.
Lunchtime.
The first part of the academic session. We have an hour break for lunch. We will see you in an hour.